I'd like to call to order a meeting of BAWSCA, Board of Directors meeting, January 16th, is about 6:33 or thereabouts. First thing we need to do is a roll call.
All right, roll call. Director Andrews.
Present.
Director Bro.
Yes, Brisbane and GVM idea present.
Chambers.
Present.
Duncan. Director Duncan.
Present.
Director Hamilton.
Present.
Director Hardy.
Present.
Director Jordan. Here. Director Kiesel. Director Lopez. Director Manalo Mellinger. Director Mickelson. Director Montano. Director Nash.
Here.
Director Piccolotti. Director Pierce.
Here.
Director Ragsdale.
Here.
Director Schneider. Director Showalter.
Here.
Director Stevenson. Director Stone. Director Vella.
Here.
Director Weed. And Director Zichterman.
Present.
We do have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Happy New Year, and welcome everyone to BAWSCA's January 16th board meeting. Before we start, let me provide a few ground rules and my comments from the chair, which I'm going to move up a little bit because I want to make the comments before we do the things. As a reminder, this meeting is being live streamed and recorded, so when speaking, please make sure your mic is on and you speak directly to your microphone. Although our usual time limits for our rules of the board do apply, we do need to be out of this room by 10 p.m. to give staff enough time to break down the room after the conclusion of the meeting, so we cannot extend past 10. As has been the case for the past several meetings, public comment on all items will be limited to 2 minutes per speaker for all items except a second period for extended public comment, which is after we've completed all of our business. Comments during that time will be on an as time permits basis. Tonight, we have an agenda full of important business for the successful operation of BAWSCA. This includes the election of officers for 2025, holding a meeting for the Regional Finance Authority, conducting a mid-year review, including updating our current work plan and budget, and providing board input to assist staff in the development of the 25-26 work plan and budget. Last but not least, as a preliminary to our event on January 29th, I would like to honor Nicole Sandkulla upon her retirement. But for now, let's start with our first special order of business, which is the election of officers for the 2025 calendar year.
Salute to the flag.
Say again?
Salute to the flag.
I forgot to salute to the flag. Okay, before we do the elections, let's stand and salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Vella. Okay, election of officers for 2025. For the election of chair, I would like to turn the meeting over to Vice Chair, Director Vella.
That's me.
That's you.
Okay, so I guess to read this, so according to the State Water Code, Division 3, Section 801-401, requires the board to elect a chair and a vice chair each year at January meeting. The term of office of the board commences at the close of the meeting at which they are elected. So, I would like to call for nominations for the position of chairperson. Please.
I'd like to push my button there. Yeah. I'd like to nominate Time Chambers for the chair position.
Okay, do I have a second?
I would like to second.
Okay. Okay, we do have a nomination and a second for Tom Chambers as Chair of BAWSCA for the year 2025. Any other nominations? Hearing none? Hearing none? Close nominations. I'll call the vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed, please raise your hand. Unanimous? Thank you very much. Do you accept?
Yes, I will. Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Vella, and thank you for the board. Next, we need to conduct elections for BAWSCA Vice Chair. The floor is open for nominations for Vice Chair. Director Hardy.
I would like to nominate Luis Vela.
I'll
for Vice Chair.
Okay, Director Ragsdale.
I'll second, thank you.
Okay. Any other nominations? Okay, hearing none, nominations are closed. All those in favor of Director Vella, raise your hand. All those opposed? Okay, it passes unanimously. Okay. Okay, now we need to recess this meeting briefly while we rearrange the room and have a brief meeting of the Regional Water Financing Authority. So I think we have two BAWSCA members that need to step back. But not Director Piccolotti. Okay. Okay, I call to order the meeting of the Regional Finance Authority. Let me get my right agenda out. Okay, roll call.
All right, Director Andrews.
Present.
Director Bro.
Present.
Director Chambers.
Present.
Director Cohen. Director Hamilton.
Here.
Director Hardy.
Present.
Director Jordan. Here. Director Kiesel.
Here.
Director Lopez. Manal here. Director Mickelson. Director Montano. Director Nash.
Here.
Director Piccolotti. Director Pierce.
Here.
Director Ragsdale.
Here.
Director Schneider. Director Showalter.
Here.
Director Stevenson.
Here.
Director Stone.
Here.
Director Vella.
Here.
And Director Weed.
Okay, we have a quorum.
I have a quorum. Thank you. Before we progress to our first special order of business, I'd like to provide a few comments about this RFA meeting. The RFA continues to be an important entity that needs to be in place because the critical role it has in ensuring, should there ever be a need, that financing capability is available to fund actions necessary to protect and improve the reliability of the regional water system. Increasingly, we see signs that San Francisco may have significant competing demands for funding and bonding capacity in the coming decades. The RFA provides BAWSCA and water users represents an important backstop to ensuring a reliable supply of high-quality water at a fair price. Next, I'd like to conduct elections for the RFA officers for 2025. Vice Chair Vella, would you please conduct the election for the RFA Board Chair?
Very good, thank you very much. And again, with the same water code, I would like to ask for nominations for chairperson for the Regional Water System Finance Authority. Director Pierce?
I'd like to nominate Tom Chambers for the position.
Do I have a second? Director
I'd
Hardy?
like to second that.
Okay, we have a motion, a nomination and a second. Do we have any other nominations for chair for the RFA? Hearing none, seeing none, nominations closed. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed? Thank you for raising your hands as well.
Okay, thank you again. Thank you to the board. Thank you to Vice Chair Vella. Now I'd like to conduct elections for RFA Vice Chair. The floor is open for nominations. Any nominations for RFA Vice Chair? Director Pierce.
I'd like to nominate Lou Vella for the position.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, Director Hardy seconds. Any other nominees? Okay, assuming none, or seeing none, nominations are hereby closed. All those in favor of Director Louis Vella as RFA Vice Chair, please raise your hand. All those opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay, thank you and congratulations, Director Vella.
Thank you.
Okay,
Back to work.
back to work. RFA consent calendar is the next item, has minutes and budget for the RFA. Does the board, any board member want to pull any of those items before we vote? Seeing none, all those in favor of passing the consent calendar, raise your hand. Say again?
Don't you need to make a motion?
I need a motion.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent calendar for the RFA.
I think council. Yeah, council.
I'll second.
And then we need public comment? Okay. Any public comment on consent calendar? Okay. Seeing none and having a motion and a second, all those in favor of the consent calendar, raise your hand. All those opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay, RFA comments from the chair, we've already done that. Public comment on items not on the agenda, and this is for RFA. Any public comments for RFA? Okay, seeing none. General Manager's report on the RFA. Mr. Schmagel.
Thank you. I just have one item, and that is an alert that you will be getting an email from Lourdes, not her regular email, but through the form filling software that we have to fill out your Form 700 for both the RFA and for the BAWSCA board. You should be getting that early next week, probably Tuesday or Wednesday. So expect that, and I believe they have to be completed and submitted by April 1st. So that's the General Manager's report for the RFA.
Okay, thank you. Any public comment on the General Manager's report? Seeing none. Director's comments on RFA. Any directors have comments on RFA? Seeing none, that concludes our business for RFA. I'd like to adjourn this meeting. The next scheduled meeting is 15th of January 2026. So, meeting's adjourned for RFA. If we can have our members back for BAWSCA, we can reconvene that meeting. Okay, meetings, BAWSCA meetings back in order. Okay, I've already given comments from the chair. The next item is BPC report. Director Hardy, can you give us the BPC report?
Absolutely. I want you to know the last time we met was last year. Sorry. December 11th, 2024, the BPC met at 1:30 here at the Burlingame Community Center. We looked at 2 recommendations that are on your agenda for tonight. It's 9G and 10A, had to do with finances and the work plan, and we unanimously recommended both. And we did not have a closed session as was put on the agenda because there was nothing new. As we said, we'll catch you up. We know nothing. Now you are caught up. So we're hoping for more information tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Harding. Any public comments on the BPC report? Seeing none, the next item is the SFPUC report, which will be given by Steve Ritchie.
Good evening, board members. Happy to be here again to report on our water supply conditions. As you can see, our reservoir storage is fairly high. It's above normal for the total storage over the year. And that's because last year was wet, of course, and the year before was wet, so we're doing very well on storage. Everybody around the state is pretty much doing very well on storage. That's pretty clear. The drought monitor, you'll note that a lot of Southern California is showing drier conditions and starting to move into drought in certain locations, which certainly has been a contributing factor to the fires in Southern California. So that's definitely an issue for all of us. And so we'll see, as we go forward here, what the outlook is for precipitation. On the precipitation to date, the black line is median conditions, and you'll notice the red line, which is this year, is exactly on top of the black line. So right now we're average, and I'll explain why in just a little bit. As you see here, this is for the Sierra, and you'll see that October was very dry, November was above average, December was very close to average, and January right now has been very dry. So you put all that together and you've got an average for the year. That's why it looks like average conditions. Similarly, in the Bay Area, although both November and December were well above average, so we're doing fairly well in terms of total precipitation here in the Bay Area. But again, January had been a very dry month, and we'll see that in a couple of slides. The snowpack upcountry, it had been riding right at the black line, but it's tailed off. We haven't had any snow really during the month of January, so it's a little bit below average now. So we'll see how the rest of the year goes. And our water available to the city, that red line, the straight one that bumps up a little bit and then down, is the district's entitlements to the Tuolumne River. And just for the record, you'll note that just at the end of December, there was a little bit where the blue is above the red line. That was water available for the system to recover under our water rights. The precipitation forecast, white generally means not much of anything happening. See the current week, which is above, January 13th to 21st, California is looking completely white. So down there, and next week, there may be some precipitation coming down, but I think we're all getting used to, looking at atmospheric rivers and knowing that they come into the west coast of California and they move a little bit north or a little bit south sometimes. So there may be some precipitation for us from that, but there may not. That second week always is a little less certain, certainly, than the coming week. But I wouldn't expect any more precipitation in January, certainly not to any great degree. This is a chart of our total deliveries, and just to spend a little bit of time on this, the blue line is the 2023 year. The little black circles, that's 2024, and you'll see that here in the early part of the year, for the first 3 months or so, deliveries were fairly low. That's because those were wet years. So you see it very predictably. Weather is very dominant in how use goes. So those are kind of flat lines here in the early part of the year. I cheated. Yesterday I looked at what actually happened last week. And if you were able to see where that number 148 is, that was the first week in the year. The second week in the year, it started to track right on top of the orange line, which was 2015, which was the last, or one of the big drought years we had. So what you see in the early part of the year, if it's a dry year, people are out watering. If it's a wet year, people are not out watering. People are watering. So demand is up. We may see that continue certainly through the rest of January, but we'll see where we go from there because the big demands really usually show up in the summer or not. So that's where we really are right now. In answer to the question that somebody's bound to ask, is like, well, are we in a drought? Maybe, maybe not. But certainly from the perspective of the amount of water we have in storage, I would not anticipate that we would be having any particular restrictions applied this year going in, unless it's completely dry through the rest of the year, which is the kind of thing we don't necessarily expect. But we'll see. We give reports out at the 1st of February and the 1st of March, what precipitation and snowpack look like. And then on April 15th or thereabouts, we give our actual prediction, or not predicted, at this point, that's when snowpack is at its peak and starting to melt. That's when we can give our best analysis of how much water is available. And so expect more information as the year progresses. And happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the board? Okay. Seeing none, any public comments? Okay, Peter. And this is a comment on, it wasn't
On the SFPUC.
on the SFPUC report.
Yeah,
Okay.
so when the SFPUC staff released the Tuolumne River Voluntary Agreement, I'm Peter Dreckmeyer with the Tuolumne River Trust Policy Director. We had a lot of criticism of it, including that it was just a checklist. There were no biological goals upon which to measure success and no adaptive management plan if we weren't reaching the biological goals. So there was a lot of discussion about it in 2019 and 2020. The commission passed resolutions that directed staff to work with the irrigation districts to include biological goals and adaptive management in the Tuolumne River Voluntary Agreement. In May, I sent a Public Records Act request to the PUC saying, please send me any documents that detail the conversations with the irrigation districts, and I was denied based on attorney-client communications. So I filed Public Records Act requests with the irrigation districts. They both responded. I got more than 100 documents. Not one mentioned any discussions with the PUC about biological goals and adaptive management. So I don't think the BAWSCA board ever voted on a position on the Tuolumne River Voluntary Agreement. I think staff just assumed that you were opposed. What's good for the environment is probably bad for water supply. I think that was the mentality. If I'm wrong, I would love to be corrected. I'd love to see minutes of any vote on the Tuolumne River Voluntary Agreement. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on, public comments on the SFPUC report? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Ritchie. Next item is public comments on items not on the agenda. Again, there's going to be a 2-minute warning or 2-minute limit. I have 4 speaker cards. The first one I got was from Rush Realm.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, it's my first BAWSCA meeting. I'm just a private citizen. I live in Redwood City. But my comments have something to do, I think, ultimately with the SFPUC and its relationship to BAWSCA. Like many of my fellow residents, we suffer from high rate increases, 8% last year, 7% this year. And I looked into it, doing some research online, and of course discovered that Redwood City buys all its water from the SFPUC, as I think most BAWSCA members do. So to understand why the rate's rising, I have to go up the ladder to look at SFPUC, which I spent a little time online today doing. And of course, it's the rate increases are related to the fact that you buy your water from SFPUC. So then the question becomes, let's look up the ladder and look at SFPUC's relationship to BAWSCA. And I'm basically here to ask you, I don't expect an answer right now, what kind of accountability you hold the SFPUC since you buy your water from them. There's a famous Latin expression, caveat emptor, the buyer beware. And the reason I raise this is because there are a lot of people that are upset with rate increases, but then it's not enough to just look at the local city, in the different regions, but to look at where the water comes from and from whom you purchase it. And I wonder if the relationship between the BAWSCA and SFPUC should be more, well, not contrarian, but a little bit more investigative. And the reason I say that is, in my research, I discovered that there was a lawsuit by SFPUC against the State Water Board, I think it was in 2019, which BAWSCA joined. And then I think last year, and I'll see if I can read this correctly, the court determined that I think they found in favor of the State Water Board, all 116 claims by 12 petitioners, including BAWSCA, were ruled against. That is to say, the State Water Board was correct. So my point is simply this.
Your 2 minutes is up, so
Okay,
just
thank you.
finish it up.
Okay, just real quickly. A lot of people are upset about this, and I wonder if you're spending more money on legal cases that end up costing us money and not actually looking at the SFPUC's long-term plans
Okay,
and what you have to pay for. Thank you.
thank you. Okay, next is Dave Warner. And these are the order I got them in my stack.
I think I'm fortunate because that's a very timely remark. So I'm Dave Warner. I'm a private and industry chief financial officer in the role, and in that role I've worked with lots of boards of directors. Hopefully you've seen the letter that's in the correspondence packet from me. As you know, you each represent tens of thousands of water users your city or agency serves. The importance of your role has increased. It used to be that wholesale water rates weren't too bad and the board could focus on reliability. But now the price of water is a concern, thank you. And so a sole focus on reliability made things at the board pretty simple. But now, and the former BAWSCA CEO led the charge for you. So question one is if your constituents you represent are now also concerned about the price of water. I know I'm hearing about it, and I'm feeling the increased cost myself. If the answer is yes, you need to direct your CEO that the price of water should also be a priority in addition to reliability. And just for clarity, you know that in BAWSCA's phrase, a reliable supply at a fair price means our fair share of total costs, not trying to address total costs. Should our thinking change that BAWSCA should also be looking out to watch the overall cost of water for us? I, of course, think the answer is yes, that no one's watching the SFPUC spending and that our climbing water rates reflect that. Are your constituents concerned about the price of water? Do you think the overall price of water should be a priority along with reliability? If so, you as a board need to provide such direction to your CEO. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next speaker is Peter Dreckmeyer.
Peter Dreckmeyer, Tuolumne River Trust. I'm hoping with new leadership we can enter an era of greater collaboration and transparency. And I'm hoping we can start soon with a workshop where you hear from us. To make good decisions, you need to have all the information, including some inconvenient truths. When I started working for the Trust 17 years ago, the big issue was the Water System Improvement Program. The projections for water demand in 2018 were 285. Ed Harrington and the SFPUC negotiated a sales cap of 265, and BAWSCA opposed that and always referred to it as a unilateral decision. In 2018, demand wasn't 285, it wasn't 265, it was 196. So a lot of that was driven by the price of water tripling, but also we all collaborated. We worked really closely with BAWSCA for 6 or 7 years on the Silicon Valley Water Conservation Awards. That's the Tuolumne in My Tap education program. Kids got information on rebates, went home and told their parents to take advantage of them. We had a number of forums, and that all changed in 2016. In September, the state came out with the draft substitute environmental document for the Bay Delta Plan. In October, the CEO of BAWSCA and the general manager of SFPUC had an editorial in the Chronicle saying that the Bay Delta plan could result in 188,000 jobs lost, $49 billion in lost sales, and 51% rationing. And we said, where did you get these numbers? Because you had a socioeconomic report 2 years ago in 2014. The numbers were 2.5 times less than this. And they said, well, that was just a draft report. We based our numbers on a 7-year-old report written by the same economist hastily. And we said, no, you just got caught. You used the bad numbers. But by that time, BAWSCA's position was already established. Hadn't even come to the board. The SFPUC, they didn't even agendize the Bay Delta plan until January. So,
Okay, your time's up. Okay, next item, next speaker is Jason, except I can't read your last name, Volk.
Hello, everyone. Jason Foster. I'm certified in sustainable accounting under International Financial Reporting Standards. And I'm here today to talk about a performance audit that was just completed on the SFPUC. So, you know, BAWSCA, and this is my first meeting, but it is a privilege to be here. BAWSCA was formed because the SFPUC is an unregulated monopoly that holds dominion over its wholesale customers that are represented by BAWSCA. This makes an independent audit of SFPUC's performance extremely important for you to be aware of and for you to understand what the action plans are, what the issues are. So, you know, the auditors found under government accounting standards that SFPUC had several issues related to procurement, vendor management, performance management, issuance and management of contracts, and performance of those duties. I strongly encourage this group. The audit was published on December 20th of 2024. I strongly encourage this group to read that audit and understand what the SFPUC action plans are to address the weaknesses identified by, you know, the city's analyst. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have no more speaker cards. Any further public comment for items not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none. Next item is consent calendar. What's the preference of the board on the consent calendar? Minutes, receive and file, and some bond surcharges. Preference of the board. Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve the items on consent.
Okay, Director Hamilton moves to approval. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Director Pierce got in there earlier. Director Pierce is the second. Any board discussion on this item? Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor of approval of the consent calendar, raise your hand. All those opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay. The lone action item on the agenda is our mid-year review work plan, a review of our mid-year work plan. Mr. Schmegel, will you please present your report as soon as he gets up there?
All right, good evening, everyone. So this is an update on our 24-25 work plan, our budget, and our general reserve. We submitted with your board packet a memorandum including Table 1, which outlines all of the items on our current work plan. We did recommend to the BPC and are recommending tonight 2 changes to the work plan as a result of the review. and I'll get into those in a second. But there are two changes that you know about. One is to recruit and hire and transition to me, the new CEO GM. And the second is consideration of a board policy directive for an adjustment to board member compensation, which you all know about as well. We are not recommending a change in the overall budget. We believe those items can be incorporated into the current budget. And I will report to the board as necessary if we do end up in a situation later in the year where we need a budget adjustment. Our current general reserve balance is, as shown on the screen here, roughly 1.4 million, approximately 24% of our operating budget, and in line with our guidelines. So I wanted to highlight a couple of items that are going well and that are our major items for the year. So this is in a little bit different format. These are excerpts from the table that you saw in the packet. And I wanted to highlight first the really core activities that the BAWSCA staff performs on a year-to-year, day-in, day-out basis. And these are in item 1B and F, item 4A, and item 9A, and have to do with administering the water supply agreement. So we are continually evaluating the 10-year capital improvement program, the alternative water supply program, and also in general the books and records of San Francisco. All of those things are on track, and we are meeting what our expectations are for performing those tasks. And again, those are the core tasks we do year in, year out on behalf of BAWSCA. Next, I'll highlight a couple of new items for this budget year. First is the beginning of our long-term reliable water supply strategy 2050 that you'll hear a little bit more about later in the session. And then also initial development of our updated regional water demand projections, and that's done on about an every 5-year basis. So these are two big initiatives that we're undertaking in this fiscal year, and those are also going well and on schedule, on target. Then in the area of water conservation, we are in the process of preparing the drought report on the 21 to 23 drought, as well as representing your interests in the making conservation a California way of life and the implementation of that. We've held workshops for the member agencies and in coordination with Valley Water as well in the Bay Area, and continue to work on a lot of initiatives associated with conservation. Those are all on schedule and performing well. And so the last page you see here are the two additional items that I mentioned up top. And these would be section 11, E and F, the recommended scope change to include the two items. So our recommendation is that the board approve the following changes to the work plan as you see on the screen there. And that's my report.
Okay, any question from board members on the report? Okay. Yes, Betsy, I think.
Thank you. I was wondering how often the plans are updated using new climate research and new climate science, given that the field is constantly moving.
So just define for me a little bit what you mean by plans. I think we're doing an update of the water demand projection that is informed by what data we get from the member agencies, and that would include their analysis of climate change effect on demand, also their housing elements and that sort of thing. I think that maybe, but I don't want to overinterpret your question.
I guess maybe the question then is, what plans are affected by the new climate science research, and how is that incorporated into plans?
So again, that was an example of how they're affected, the design or the demand study. The second big initiative that we have, again, the strategy 2050. The last time we did that strategy, I think, was 2015. What was the date on that strategy? And so we're taking a long-term look, and our staff is aware of all of the things that are changing. One of the big topics, and we'll get into this in an agenda item a little bit later in the meeting, we're focused on the risks associated with supplying water in our service area, in the service area of the member agencies. That certainly is a risk that will be identified as part of that discussion. And so that will be incorporated, and the potential effects, how severe they might be, and the range of effects are going to be certainly included in how we evaluate the strategy for 2050.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from board members? Okay, yes.
Thank you. I have a few questions, and one following Director Nash's question. I believe that SFPUC at one point said that they would update the LTVA every 5 years. I don't know if they've ever initiated that update. I'm curious if the CEO is aware.
So I'm not aware of that specific instance. I can certainly research it for you and get back to you. So I'm gonna have to take that and find you an answer.
Okay.
Okay.
I would, appreciate that, because if they haven't, I think this board would be hopefully interested in kind of following up on that, at least maybe passing a resolution that would encourage the SFPUC to follow up on that promise. On item, kind of go through my notes here, items 1B and 1C. So the SFPUC is presenting their latest 10-year capital plan on February 11th. I'm curious if you've had a chance to be able to review that, and if you're able to maybe see other ways that SFPUC could prioritize projects that are maybe more important, with any opportunities to be able to defer some projects over the next couple of years so we can reduce some of the pressure on rates. We've already heard from some public speakers this evening about concerns about rates. I'm personally hearing that quite frequently in Palo Alto. I'm sure I'm not the only one around this table, and feel like we haven't done really enough to be able to address that piece of our mission. And so curious, what are the levers that we can pull that we can kind of help SFPUC on that?
Sure. So the presentation that's going to be made next month is a mid-cycle adjustment to their previously approved 10-year CIP. So it's kind of that interim year. They do it every other year. And we have seen the changes that they've proposed. And I don't know if I can turn it over to Tom Francis. Tom is the key person on the BAWSCA staff that deals with the capital side. So I'm going to let Tom address your specific questions about it.
Great.
The SFPUC has provided us with some draft information that they plan on continuing to develop for use to share with their commission in February. I can tell you certainly that they are reducing their budget. There's a few projects that they were able to, for various reasons, cut and or delay, and BAWSCA supports what they're proposing to do. I'm probably not at liberty to discuss the details now, but I should be able to by the BPC meeting that's coming up next month, or certainly the board meeting. So from my perspective, I think you'll be pleased. The one caveat I'd add to that, though, is there are other projects in the 10-year CIP that had what I would call preliminary cost information in them. Some of those are dam projects or building large spillways, and I'll be honest with you, as those move into design and construction, they could be very expensive. So we as a region and we as water users support those types of projects. We want a reliable water supply, but they are going to be expensive, and we just need to be prepared. But I can tell you that at least what the San Francisco folks are bringing to the table in February is going to be a lower cost CIP as compared to what they passed last year.
Well, that's good to hear. And then kind of following up on that, the Q4 2024 Water Enterprise Capital Improvement Plan report showed a $330 million budget overage for current capital projects. Do we know what's causing those overages?
You know, in general, and I may kind of follow Tom's approach, I could get into some details, but a lot of the dollar amounts that are in a CIP are relative to planning costs for projects, and as they move into design or construction, they have a more, if you will, a more detailed cost estimate prepared. So when they do a 10-year CIP, some of them are planning dollars, and then when they get to the construction stage, it does tend to be more expensive. And there are certain projects, to be frank with you, that end up having cost overruns or cost issues, and some of the work associated with, for example, Mountain Tunnel or other big projects end up costing more because of the effect of inflation or cost increases for materials, those type of things. It all adds up. So I'll try to work with Tom to get some more specific information about that 380 and get back to you to tell you maybe some more details about why, where some of the big ticket items were relative to that.
Yeah, and I'd be curious too, when you kind of come back to see maybe how are we trying to improve our estimating as well, or SFPUC, because that's a pretty significant overage. And then one of the speakers spoke to the performance audit of the SFPUC's work project. Seemed like there were some significant failings, my understanding, as well as what that public speaker spoke of. Is staff prepared to be able to discuss that tonight, or is that something that we are going to discuss at a later BAWSCA meeting?
I think that we could discuss it generally tonight, and Tom, again, is the expert on that.
Sure.
Maybe just a quick.
Very brief,
Yeah.
and you tell me if I'm being too long. I agree with the commenter tonight. There is a audit that was prepared on December 20th, and BAWSCA has read through that. If any of you want a link to the audit, I can work through our general manager to provide it to you. If you look at I guess I'd say aside from the findings, I also kind of concentrated on the recommendations, 7 recommendations that they had relative to the water side. There was other, San Francisco PUC also has wastewater and power, so I focused on the water side recommendations. Most of them are relative to additional training and of staff on how to deal with change orders, and also essentially how to manage construction contracts, to do a better job training the people that they employ to do that. They also call for the development of, if you will, procedures or policy manuals to talk about how to deal with change orders and training. And I'll work with our GM on that, but BAWSCA is very supportive of that type of activity. So we find that the audit is a good tool to illustrate that matches the type of things that we as an agency at BAWSCA are supportive of. We want to have people working for the PUC that are very adept at managing construction and dealing with change orders. Likely you'll learn more about it as the next month unfolds, because our general manager will perhaps be making those type of statements either in a letter or maybe at the adoption of the mid-cycle CIP. That will be up to him in terms of how to relay that on. But it's a good, it's an interesting audit report, and we can share the link with you folks if you want to read it. Also, the SFPUC put a letter of response at the very last page of that audit, where their general manager agreed with the findings of the city's audit staff. So San Francisco agrees with the findings.
Thank you. I got a couple more questions, if it's okay with the chair, or?
Let's have a couple other people, and then I'll come back to you.
Sounds good.
Okay, Director Pierce.
Thanks. Since this is really a mid-year review and looking at the recommended changes, and we have some that are really thought out by staff and ready for implementation, what I'd like to suggest is that it seems like the idea of fair price and rates is of interest, and that may vary across our agencies. So what I'd like to suggest is perhaps this would be something that staff could take a look at and see what might be an appropriate way for us to consider this moving forward, and have some other recommendations rather than really digging into it tonight, if that would be my suggestion.
Okay, thank you. Director Andrews.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a question about the budgeting and the project that was mentioned. That was a cost overrun of $350. Is it a $350 at planning stage, or is it in the middle of construction?
You know, that's kind of the total CIP, so
Okay.
what I would suggest is let me do a little background and provide it to the general manager, and we can put a little short summary together about the financial issues that San Francisco reported relative to their the changes that they had to deal with on a multiple projects. It's kind of a combination of everything added up. So.
Okay, and when you do, can you also look at whether some of those change orders were actually possibly opportunity change orders, where they might have found some efficiencies in one project by increasing that project versus another project? Also confirming whether the engineer's estimate was spot on, or did something happen? Were they tracking inflation? And then also, were there any regulatory changes that caused them to have those overruns? Because sometimes it's out of the project's control. If there's new legislation that's coming down, like what we're dealing with wastewater, with nutrient removal and PFAS, it's actually going to change a lot of projects. So just wanted to make sure we have that context when you report that.
Yeah, beyond just telling you about what a dollar amount might be for, I'm focused on maybe the higher overrun type things, or the higher financial implications. The folks at the SFPUC always do a good job of keeping me informed as to why the reasons are that the overrun occurred, and I'll add that information in there. And there are projects that have come in less than what was proposed, but due to the inflationary period that we're in right now, to be frank, the difference between what was originally budgeted maybe 4 or 5 years ago versus what it costs now, it's really hard to not have that occur where more money is needed.
And then also the financing, maybe we couldn't get certain bonds or certain loans, and it changed that, so. If we can put
I'll try to make it thorough, maybe work with our general manager to determine what format best to put it in, and then he can share that out.
Perfect, thank you.
And we can share it at a future meeting, if not just directly to the interested members.
Okay,
I think we can get that out to everybody.
Awesome, thanks.
Okay, Director Stone.
Good, thank you. Just two more. So on items 4A and 4B, I think to understand our need for the alternative water supply,
Angela.
I think it's really important to understand drought risk at various demand levels. And there's just so many unknowns right now as far as our projections in the future, which you spoke to but SFPUC is only using 265 MGD as their standard for demand, which just has never seemed really sufficient in my eyes. So I'm curious, kind of as an organization, how we feel about that, and if there's a need for this board to provide direction to staff to maybe pass a resolution that would ask SFPUC to provide quantified design drought risk at just various levels of demand and not just at that 265.
I think I understand your question. So that they have an obligation to provide a certain amount of water, the 184 to the BAWSCA agencies. And the question that you have is related to what's the drought risk if we're using more or less than that?
Correct.
Yeah, and we can certainly make that ask of San Francisco. It's really those are really their calculations. We're holding them to their obligation, so to speak. And so the alternative water supply is the amount of necessary additional supply that would get us to that 184 right now. I mean, that's the way it's envisioned, and the gap that's shown in the alternative water supply that's, I know, been presented to the board in the past shows, how many additional million gallons a day might be needed to get to that level. So I think they've only looked at that level, but we can certainly request that they look at different levels.
I'd appreciate it. I think it would be beneficial. So thank you for that. And then my last question on item 5A. So in the correspondence packet, there's a letter from you to the State Water Resource Control Board submitting comments regarding updates to the Bay Delta Plan and supporting the Healthy Rivers and Landscape proposal. Full transparency, Palo Alto continues to support the Bay Delta Plan, so we kind of reject this view. But I think my greater point for this board is that if BAWSCA members are going to support the Healthy Rivers proposal, I think it's important that we understand how it is comparing to the Bay Delta plan. So be curious if there's an opportunity for us to be able to maybe have a workshop on the Bay Delta plan and the Healthy Rivers proposal in an upcoming meeting, so that way we as board members can actually speak knowledgeably about the differences between these two plans and be more informed as we move forward on them.
So again, I think that is certainly something that we can ask SFPUC to bring to us as a presentation, because it's really a plan that they developed. And so I'm happy to ask them to follow up with that.
I'd appreciate that. Thanks. Great. Those are my questions. Thanks for the patience of the chair.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from board members? Any questions from the public or comments from the public? Okay, Peter. Okay.
I was Peter Dreckmeyer, Tuolumne River Trust. I wasn't planning on commenting on this item, but I think Director Stone raised a really good point, and the need for information, because what I've seen at the State Water Board when an issue like the Tuolumne River Voluntary Agreement comes up, there's a handful of representatives from BAWSCA or staff from the agencies that basically read talking points provided by BAWSCA staff. Those talking points come from the SFPUC. BAWSCA has done none of its own analysis, and there's no one affiliated with BAWSCA that would feel really comfortable explaining what the Tuolumne River Voluntary Agreement is and what it would do. There was, probably because we kept complaining, on December 9th, 2020, the CEO gave a report, and it was all information from the PUC. Dave and I responded with a 15-page letter, point by point, saying, this is wrong, this is wrong. And the reply we got was, hey, it's the SFPUC's plan. We'll send your comments to them and they can respond. And of course, they're never going to respond. So that has happened over and over again. I mean, we get 2 minutes here and there. Why can't we present information to you that would be really valuable so that you're not over-investing in really expensive alternative water supplies, so you can do what your constituents want, which is support the environment? Tuolumne River has the worst salmon population of any Central Valley river. Give us a chance to talk with you. You don't have to believe it all, but listening to the facts is really, really critical. Thank you, Director Stone.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment on this item? Okay.
Hi, again, Rush from Public Citizen, Redwood City. Just to reiterate, this is back to something I just heard. Let the buyer beware. And if you're buying from someone who's telling you something and you're feeding it back to you as if it was a real thing, you need some alternative way to look at the system. Otherwise, you're just caught in it. And the long and short is that people at the bottom, ratepayers, pay for it, not to mention the environment and everything else. So you need somebody else in the SFPUC to tell you how you might analyze the situation. So, caveat emptor.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, I think we need to have a motion on this for the adjustments to the mid-year review. Have we had, I don't think we've had a motion. Director Hardy.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the mid-year work plan with the 2 different changes.
Okay, Director Ragsdale.
I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay, thank you. Next item is CEO reports. Mr. Schmegel, you're not going to get to leave for a while.
Well, it turns out I am going to leave because I'm going to delegate. So our next, one of the topics in the CEO report is the Long-Term Reliable Water Supply Strategy 2050 project. And Nagina Shuri from our staff is going to come and present that topic.
Good evening, everyone. I'm happy to say that BAWSCA's long-term reliable water supply strategy, Strategy 2050, has officially began at the beginning of this calendar year. To recap, starting in July of 2023, we began the process to develop that scope of work for the strategy. And with board and water management representatives' engagement, we finalized that scope of work in fiscal year 23-24. Now, we are actually at that starred part there in January of 2025. And we have begun that work on completing those 7 tasks that we identified in our scope of work. And this is a work effort that will take place within the next 2 years and will involve input from the board, the water management representatives, and stakeholders. Now, I want to really re-emphasize what importance it was to get that input that was received at our WMR workshops and board meetings. That was really helpful in the development of the Strategy 2050 objectives, the purpose of it, as well as that scope of work. And we wanted to kind of ensure that we're going to have this collaboration and input throughout the development of Strategy 2050. And so BAWSCA has prepared a schedule identifying key milestones and opportunities for board and WMR water management representative involvement. Now, we are anticipating 3 workshops in 2025, the calendar year, for the board. And this will basically, we're trying to finalize the exact format and timing of that. We wanted to understand what type of work we're going to be working on first and have substantive amount of information that we can present to you all. So we'll have a clearer understanding of that in the months to come. And additional workshops will be scheduled in 2026, and a final meeting will be held to discuss kind of the final report that ties in all of that work that we are going to be doing in the next 2 years. Now, the board workshop topics obviously will align with the key milestones and the tasks that we have put out in the scope of work. And WMR engagement will take place during separately held WMR meetings and workshops and during our monthly meetings. And we actually have our first kickoff meeting with the WMR scheduled for next month, so February 19th. We developed a preliminary schedule for the 2025 topics. The first is to review the approach to identify potential risks impacting water supply reliability. These include climate change, sea level rise, evolving regulations that are coming up, and other uncertainties. So we would be having this discussion here on some of the works that we're going to do research on and present it to you all. The other is to review the regulatory risks, so reviewing, and that kind of ties in with that first one of the assessing water reliability risks, but is to review current and upcoming regulations that are affecting water management. This includes water use efficiency, quality, environmental flow, potable reuse, and others. And then we'll kind of assess those regional frameworks and understand what BAWSCA's role should be in that and how we should, BAWSCA's role in playing in that framework. The second topic is soliciting input on project concepts. We want to seek board input on local water supply and demand management projects. This can include recycled water, stormwater capture, groundwater, additional conservation programs, desal, transfers. We really want to understand, what the board input on this, and we'll identify those projects of interest and provide further details about them. We'll have further information about what the costs are, what the yield is, challenges, and any secondary benefits that might come from these projects. And then we're hoping to get the board's input on BAWSCA's role in supporting these projects moving forward. Now, the last topic is to review affordability findings. You know, we had a lot of discussion on that tonight. And one of the tasks actually in this research, in our scope of work, is to evaluate some of these rate assistance programs and develop recommendations on potential programs that could be considered to address affordability challenges. And at the workshop, we're hoping again to discuss the findings that we will have with this. Again, this is a preliminary schedule. I'm very much excited to get this work started. There's a lot to be done in the next 2 years. And I think the work is going to be really valuable with your input in the years to come. That's going to have, you know, a better understanding of BAWSCA's role, not only in the few years, but in the decades to come. So we're really excited, and I wanted to, that concludes my discussion with that, and I want to leave it open to any suggestions or comments you might have at this time. Thank you.
Director Ragsdale, I believe, yeah.
I had just one quick question on topic 3. So I know that's way in the future, but for the Prop 118, I'm sorry, Prop 2, what is 118? Prop 218. What level would you get down to ways to set rates in terms of the tiers and all of that, or no, it's more just the processes of 218?
No, it would look at what other agencies, even throughout California, are working on, both with the 218 as well as, you know, looking at what type of, if it's tiered rates, what has worked, what hasn't, what can we learn from that, and present it for recommendations.
Okay. Director Pierce?
Yes, when under number 2, when we are looking and soliciting input on the project concepts, will you have the responses of the water management reps in there?
We're hoping to get that before we present it.
I think that would be really helpful, because some of us are not as involved in the water aspect of it. We've been more in the political aspect, so I think that would be really helpful in knowing the direction that we want to have BAWSCA pursue as their role would be really helpful. Thank you.
Okay,
And-
thank you.
Oh, sorry, just to add to that, we do meet obviously with the water management reps on a monthly basis, and they will have many more chances to look at the details of this as we go forward in 25 and 26. They're a big part of this project.
Okay, any other questions from board members? Okay, and we'll do public comments after we do complete all the
Yeah.
CEO reports.
So I'm going to turn to Tom Francis for the next 2 subtopics here on the CEO report.
Thank you, Director Chambers and board members. Wanted to talk really briefly about Tier 2. It's a 1-slide update. It's good news. Things are moving along as planned and as scheduled. So I'd like to say I have only good news tonight for you. The water management reps and your respective agencies' legal counsels, along with what I would call your senior managers or city managers for some of you, or general managers as well, met on December 12th, where BAWSCA staff, including our attorneys, talked about the adoption materials that were in development as of December 12th, as well as the steps needed to take this forward to their respective city councils for adoption. Specifically, there's a couple of materials. There's a Tier 2 plan itself, which is something to approve, but yet there's also the water supply agreement that's in place that needs to be amended. And so the amended water supply agreement would need to be adopted. 2 but linked components. Specifically, what's happening also is that our lawyer here and her team are developing those adoption packages. They'll be sharing it with San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. They've already started that sharing with their attorneys to make sure that there's agreement in place, and they're actually working together on much of the adoption package. And the reason why is the first entity that will be adopting the WSA amendment, because that's what they adopt, is going to be the SFPUC. And the schedule as it currently sits is going to be in late February or maybe March, when the SFPUC would take this to their commission for approval. Once that happens, then the full package goes to each of your cities or water districts, and we'll start the adoption process. As you recall, each of your agencies will be asked to adopt the amended WSA and approve Tier 2. Again, we have all indication that we will receive full support, or this will be supported. BAWSCA staff are on point to attend your respective council meetings if requested, or if we at BAWSCA determine that it would be a good idea that we be in the audience. So that in a nutshell is my update of the Tier 2 effort. And I either can take questions now, or I can move on. So I'm at your...
Just a
Mr.
quick
Hamilton.
question. I'm sorry. Just a quick question from as I recall, you require all 26 agencies to vote yes on their respective councils and whatever for this to go through. Those are the rules.
Yeah, that is correct. All 26 member agencies will need to adopt for this to become an amended WSA.
Which is why it was so important to have all of those meetings and get to the agreement on December 12th before sending it all out. That's really, okay. Thank you.
You are correct. And we have our former general manager to thank for a lot of that support building. But we've built it.
Thank you.
Okay, Director Pierce. Okay. Any other questions from board members? Okay. Bay Delta update.
Yeah, Tom's going to keep doing that.
Okay.
So, as I think certainly all the existing directors are aware, I could spend 2 days talking about the Bay Delta plan. But what I wanted to update you folks tonight about are just some specific current activities taking place at the State Board. And those are involved with, really they're involved with the Phase 2 of the Bay Delta plan. So Phase 2 deals with the Sacramento River parts of the Bay Delta. Not necessarily what I would clarify as our part, the San Joaquin part, which is what the Tuolumne flows into. But it's important, and you'll understand as I go through a couple of points here. So Phase 2 had a draft plan that was released by the State Board, sort of a program of implementation. That's what POI stands for. And we were aware that it was going to do this, but the POI references the Tuolumne River, as well as makes some requirements, but they don't go into a lot of detail about the Tuolumne River. And the reason why is when you think about the flow that goes through the Bay Delta, to do Phase 2, they have to understand how much flow is coming from the Phase 1 rivers. I'm being very simplistic here, but we are linked. And what's proposed as part of the voluntary agreement for the TRBA was kind of linked into some of the analysis, at least the flow compartments of it. So we wanted to see, BAWSCA wants to see, as well as the SFPUC and others, wanted to understand quite clearly how the Tuolumne and its flows is being referenced in Phase 2. And so it's important for us to understand that, the unimpaired flow provisions, as well as what's now called the Healthy River and Landscape Proposal for the Sacramento River system, because it also links quite closely to what's going to be proposed for the Tuolumne. So in terms of what's happening over the last couple months and what continues to happen, the State Board held 4 workshops in November, December, where they talked about this plan of implementation and specifically had panel presentations from either State Board staff or Department of Water Resource staff in combination with water agency senior people, as well as NGOs and tribal representatives. 4 full-day workshops were held in 2024. And there was significant discussion that took place. And, you know, the likelihood is that the state board's schedule for phase 2 is going to take longer than they anticipated, which unfortunately in turn affects us on phase 1. It's going to take us longer to go through the TRVA review and approval process that the state board's going through. We've yet to understand what that schedule might be, but we just kind of are clear it's going to take some time. There's a 5th workshop on January 23rd of this month, and I'll attend that. I could go into a lot of details about what each workshop talked about, but just basically it's elements of, a big part of it is elements of these healthy river and landscape proposals as well as voluntary agreements being put forward. So it's really, to me, it's fascinating. I've attended 4 of the workshops, all 4, and I plan on attending the 5th. And again, once these workshops are done, there's going to be more, and we're in the midst of it right now. So it isn't just workshops anymore. Basically, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit. There was also a comment period for this plan of implementation, and comments were due on January 10th. BAWSCA submitted written comments. We're supportive of voluntary agreements. We've made that clear to the board and to the public for the last many years, essentially, since 2018. And that's what our letter recognizes, essentially. There's a bit more that we go into in the letter, but it's trying to preserve that thought process when the board looks at phase 2 for the Sacramento, is to say, hey, we really support the voluntary agreements, and by the way, the Tuolumne is being referenced in your voluntary agreement process for phase 2. So that's kind of what the letter says. There was other letters drafted by the SFPUC, and also, well, not necessarily by the SFPUC, by the Tuolumne River Partners, of which the SFPUC is a member, as well as the San Joaquin Tributary Authority, that's SJTA, of which the SFPUC is a member. NGO groups have also commented. So, you know, there's a lot of interest in phase 2, the plan of implementation, and in particular the voluntary agreements that are under development. And again, the Tuolumne is just one VA. There's healthy rivers and landscapes. It's a much broader issue for all the tribs to the Sacramento and San Joaquin. But what I said, there's a lot of stuff still going on. A lot of comments in those workshops. I wouldn't say there are disagreements taking place, but there needs to be more work on the state board staff's process to kind of fill in some gaps that were present between the interested parties. In other words, between what the water agencies think is needed within that POI versus what the state board thinks is needed. So what they said is, well, we'll have 11 workshops during the month of January, or working group meetings during the month of January through March. And they'll be 2 hours each, and they're through Zoom. And anybody who's interested can attend. You got to register in advance. I'll tell you what I'll be doing on 11 days between now and March 4th. I'll be attending those, or at least listening in. Once March gets through, I'll work through our general manager to figure out how best to update you as to what took place at the workshops. I can tell you they're going to try to bring as many parties together on what's required as part of the flow accounting, the monitoring of flow, how to flush out the details that's needed to make sure that the VAs could be supported by all the parties. It could be seen as a Herculean task, because while we as water agencies are very supportive of the voluntary agreements, you know, there's people in this room tonight who are not. I'll just let you know. But we're hopeful that the state board is succeeding or successful in moving the VAs forward. So that is, in a nutshell, my Bay Delta Plan update, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Again, it's just kind of a snapshot of what's happening over the last couple of months and 2 months moving forward.
Okay, Director Hardy.
Thank you. Just a really quick, you do a good job of explaining all the letters, but you did leave out for our public NGO and what that means.
Yeah, it stands for non-governmental organizations. So you got some friends in the room, Tuolumne River Trust, California Sports Protection Fishing Alliance, Friends of the River, Sierra Club, I could go on, but those are the types of people that will be commenting or have commented and attend the workshops and the working group meetings.
Thank you. It's just important for our public, if they look at this, to know what those letters mean. Thank you.
Okay, any other, okay, I can't read this because it's, Pat? I couldn't see your name. It's sent
In
away.
terms of BAWSCA's, I'm new.
Sure.
In terms of BAWSCA, and I haven't really thought about the Bay Delta Plan seriously in many years, but I worked on stuff related to it maybe 20 years ago. Anyway, so at that time, climate change really wasn't something that was we were worried about. So could you give us like a paragraph or two about how climate change is incorporated now into the Bay Delta Plan?
Yeah, you know, I'm almost reluctant to try to give you a paragraph. It is certainly something that needed to be considered by San Francisco PUC as part of the water supply planning effort. There was reference earlier tonight, a long-term vulnerability assessment, where the PUC looked at some, and there's a fairly lengthy report. It was also co-authored by, I'm going to forget the name, but one of the Water Resources Foundation. So it was a 2-3 year effort to look at what are the big risks or factors that face our watershed. One of them looked at was climate change. The other one is, frankly, regulatory risks. There was water quality risks and other things. From a climate change perspective, and I would, again, look to the SFPUC to review this and see if this is still current. Where our Hetch Hetchy Reservoir is located is pretty far up in the watershed, and it is a really large storage reservoir. So how climate change might impact our water supply, at least since in terms of where it's geologically located, is it might change the timing of when we would fill the reservoir, because maybe snowmelt might take place sooner. But the studies that I've read is it won't be as severe of an impact as perhaps what you've read for other parts of the country. Now, that's just an initial review that I've had. How we look at it as part of the Bay Delta Plan, and how the Bay Delta Plan is considering those risks, I think I'd have to maybe review again that with some of my counterparts to be able to say with clarity, here's how it considers that. Right now, the Bay Delta Plan is looking at water quality, and they want to make sure that the fisheries living in our system have the adequate flows needed or conditions needed to support essentially the salmon and other issues. And so they're focused more on that versus like future risks. Hopefully I haven't confused you there, but
Okay.
in working with our general manager, I think certainly for some of the new board members, it behooves us to take some one-on-one time with you and talk about the Bay Delta Plan and talk about the litigation that's going on, talk about maybe other issues that you might be concerned about, and because it could take a while to get you up to speed.
I'll look forward to that.
Yeah, we will do that.
Okay, Director Weed. John, do you want to get closer to your mic or move it down so it's,
There we are. Okay, I'm on now.
that's better.
Okay, well, I note comments by PUC staff going back 5 years, and more commonly at sessions at the Association of California Water Agencies meetings, that there's no correlation for the past 25 years between flows and fish counts. It suggested that the primary reason for that is predation, particularly the fish hatcheries. Has that come up in your discussion, in the discussions at the state meetings you've been attending? And is anyone paying attention to the reality that are we dancing on the head of a pin? Thank you.
You know, the discussions haven't necessarily focused on habitat creation and habitat issues like dealing with predation, at least the workshops that I've listened in on, which doesn't mean that that isn't an important topic that is discussed by SFPUC currently. They're the primary ones talking to the state board staff about the voluntary agreement that they developed. So you know, I'm not saying I'm going to push that question off to them, but I had not heard it during the workshop, John. They were talking more about you know, flows and components like that.
Exactly. And it's been noted at a number of years ago by the Department of Water Resources that their only authority is flows. The rest of these other issues might require additional authorizations, but more importantly, they didn't have the staff to do anything but regulate flows. So as we get into these more complex agreements, it'll be interesting to see how they address that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions from board members? Seeing none, the next three items on the CEO reports, CEO letter, Board of Directors policy calendar, which is at the end of our packet, and the correspondence packet, which is under separate cover. Does the board member have any questions on those items? If not, is there any public comment on the CEO reports? Okay, yes, Dave Warner. And again, 2 minutes.
I just want to comment on the long-term reliable water supply. To me, it seems like as a foundational item, you really need to understand drought risk. If you don't understand drought risk, you don't know how much of a supply you actually need to have. And my understanding is the SFPUC has never quantified the level of drought risk that their design drought model has. And complicating this factor is that model was designed at, this came up earlier, at 265 MGD. And I think, you know, I think last year we were at 184. So we really do need this, what are the different levels of demand and what is the drought risk associated with that as a foundational item for the long-term reliable water supply? Because if you don't have that foundational piece and it turns out it's based on something that isn't what's current, then it's not all that useful. And sort of Palo Alto has had this experience. And then the second thing is climate change is a huge issue. And my understanding is the last time the SFPUC did their long-term vulnerability assessment was it started with a climate change workshop by 9 climate scientists in 2019, and then they generated a whole full report that I think was issued in 2021. So it's coming up on 5 years, and so I think, again, you really need to know what's the impact of climate change for a long-term reliable water supply. And I think as another board member mentioned here, we really should get an update to that. And to my knowledge, the SFPUC hasn't started that, and that's why I think it would be important for BAWSCA to say, hey guys, we would really like this as a foundational item for the work we have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Peter.
Peter Dreckmeyer, Tuolumne River Trust. It's really important before considering investing in really expensive alternative water supplies to understand what's the range of what's needed. The alternative water supply plan looks at 2 numbers. Obligations, which is your 184 plus 9 for San Jose, Santa Clara, plus 81 for San Francisco, so 274. Demand's been under 200 million gallons per day for the last 10 years. It's been in decline for quite a while. The other one is demands, which are the urban water management plan projections. So the urban water management plans have been off by an average of 22% over the last 25 years. And the PUC itself has said, you know, this is the outside envelope based on Plan Bay Area. Palo Alto had a presentation on the One Water Plan last week, and in that plan they look at a range. They have low, medium, and high demand. Now, you know, Stanford University is close by, so we tend to think things through that way. But high is the urban water management plan. Low is scenario E from BAWSCA's 2022 demand projections. So BAWSCA did a great thing. It's like looked at a range. Scenario A, Plan Bay Area, the urban water management plans. Scenario E is Department of Finance projections for population growth. A super simple thing for you all to do is to ask the SFPUC, how would using our scenario E affect that 92 MGD figure for demand? $17 billion, that's how much 92 MGD would cost. I think the answer would be it would shave off about 30 MGD from that. Why not just have the range? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment on CEO reports? Okay, seeing none, our next item on the agenda is closed session about FERC and Bay Delta. Any public comment on the private session, on the closed session, which I guess I need to ask for? Okay, let's break to set up the room for closed session. And the guests will have to leave or wait out in the hallway.
session ended at
Director Hardy, could you please have a seat? Okay, now continue,
Yes.
Attorney.
Closed session ended at 8:18 and no action was taken.
Okay. Next item is the discussion item fiscal review plan. Our next item is the 2025-26 work plan and budget planning session. This planning session provides board members with the opportunity to give the CEO General Manager guidance in the development of fiscal year 2025-26 work plan and operating budget. As you all know, the board sets the work plan and the budget, and it's the CEO's job to execute that plan and deliver results. So I'd like to turn the meeting over to Mr. Schmegel, who will take his orders for next year's work plan.
Ready for your orders. Thank you, Director Chambers. So this is the first step in our budgeting process for the 25-26 fiscal year. So this is an assessment of our long-term critical issues and major challenges. So this long-term view allows us to identify critical results and a timeline for those, whether they need to be done right away in the next fiscal year or in the midterm or in the long term. And it forms the basis of our 25-26 work plan and results to be achieved. In your board packet, there's a table 1 associated with this item. And it might be better to refer to this just in general because it's small print and you have it in front of you. You can hold it at an appropriate distance from your face. This is our full list of challenges that the staff has reviewed and is proposing for the next fiscal year. It is very close to the set of challenges that were presented to the board in the last fiscal year, a year ago. I wanted to highlight 3 or 4 changes just so you know what we've changed, and then I would love to hear from the board about anything else that they might want to change or add or subtract from this. So the very first thing on here on our slides is we've changed the Tier 2 discussion to be ratification and implementation of Tier 2. That just reflects the further along the process that we are. Going to the next slide, as we heard during the RFA meeting, we are hearing from more and more, I guess, from SFPUC that the other obligations that they have might cause them to reach bonding capacity sooner than they expect, or seek to spend more of their money on a wastewater system. So we do want, in the midterm and long term, to consider the use of the RFA maybe more actively than we have in the past. And so we've added that as a challenge for the mid to long term. And then the last item that we changed is in response to a comment that we heard at the November meeting, that we're going to look more closely earlier at the BAWSCA pension and OPEB liability management. And so we'll be following, actually we're scheduling to follow up with that very shortly here at the BPC meeting in February. So those are the changes that we've made. And I'd love to hear any additional challenges, any additional thoughts that board members have. Welcome your comments tonight. And certainly you can also provide them individually to us after the meeting if you haven't had a chance to think about it, but this is your opportunity in full public session to talk about what other issues we should consider. And you have the full list of issues in front of you from the board packet.
Any comments? Director Andrews.
Thank you. I'm happy to see the resiliency and ensuring reliability in an emergency, especially during this time. Wanted to know, where can we fit, if I'm missing it, please forgive me, but where do we fit in educating customers, residents about just water conservation? I know there was some images and some advertising that was done in previous years, and one of my council members used one of those images in one of his meetings. So just wanted to see if there's anything that can be updated in engaging the public on water conservation.
Great, and what I've experienced as a former board member, and just to tell you, I'm going to write down all of the comments and questions that folks have, and we'll get back to you at the next meeting.
Okay.
So it doesn't put me on the spot
Sure.
of trying to find something for you now.
I'll rephrase.
So,
Can you add that?
yeah, we will look into that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments or things? Director Weed?
Yes, thank you. Beware the black swans. One of those is PFAS. It's a circular regulated contaminant now with joint and several liability. This last week I've seen on Facebook they're advertising, if you've ingested water for 6 months in the state of California and a number of other states, contact us to see if you can be put on the class action lawsuit. Recycled water has been identified by some as a de novo generator of PFAS. There's efforts in Washington, D.C. to have water agencies given immunity from the PFAS, but in the history of the Clean Water Act and over 100 contaminants, immunity has never been granted. It's one of those areas that you have the biosolids. There are lawsuits in Texas from fertilizer companies, et cetera, which are finding that in the waste process, PFAS, or maybe they are combined into the actionable PFAS. Over 10,000 components, maybe 20 are now being measured and traced. But it's one of those areas that if you don't need to take on the liability or the risk, why? So, thank you.
Director Pierce?
I'll preface this with making sure that we have a reliable source of water is absolutely critical. And we've spent a lot of time and money and effort to ensure that San Francisco meets its obligations. But I'd also like to see if we could take a look at managing the costs. If it looks like they're going to be putting things off in the future, making sure that the water supply is still reliable, but that we look for an eye at decreasing the costs. I don't want to sacrifice reliability for decreased water rates, but I think it might be useful for us to understand the rate projections that San Francisco has and how we feed into that, and if there is anything that we can do to manipulate that or manage that. In the past, we had the fund that enabled us to help to keep the water rates at a reasonable level, and I think we've used up all that funding at this point. But I think given the other conversations around the table tonight, that might be a long-term kind of look that we might consider. Thanks.
Okay, any other comments? Things for CEO to look at?
One more over here, Tom.
Okay, Peter.
Thank you. I think when I look at BAWSCA's brand statement, reliable supply, high quality water, and fair price, we need to focus on all three elements at all times. And sometimes we focus so much on reliability or supply that we lose sight of the ratepayer perspective. So I echo Director Pierce's comments about making sure we've looked at that. And a big part of that, having faced many CIP projects at a local level, is the effectiveness of the actual estimation process and budgeting. And many organizations, and I would fathom SFPUC is part of this challenge, do not have the requisite skills to adequately estimate the true cost of a program or a project. And you don't find out until you're knee-deep in design and engineering. That happens at Caltrains, that happens at a lot of different entities. And we need to make sure that we're putting the right microscope on those types of processes, because that is where that price comes from, ultimately. And so I would just echo Director Pierce's comments on making sure that all the flavors of those priorities reflect that.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay, Director Showalter, I think.
Yeah, I just want to make a pitch for reliability. And as a civil engineer, I just have to tell you that one of the things I've learned over time is that O&M deferred is O&M that goes up in costs. So I just want us to really be aggressive in our evaluation of the work that SFPUC is doing to keep their system, keep our system in good shape. I just can't emphasize enough how that's important for reliability and it's important for cost. So we just always have to keep our eye on that prize.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and I think Director Stevenson, is your flag still up? No. Okay. I think that's it.
All right, thank you for the comments, and we will get back to you at the next meeting and work on this work plan. Thank you very much.
Okay, our next agenda item is proclamation honoring Nicole Sandkulla.
Oh, excuse me, could you just
public comment?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, public comment on next year's operating budget. Seeing none, now we can go to Ms. Sandkulla's proclamation. As our last order of business, I'd like to take this precious meeting time to acknowledge and honor Nicole for her decades of service to our member agencies and water customers of the Bay Area. Ms. Sandkulla, will you approach the lectern in front and center with Director Pierce? Since you have accomplished so much, it was really hard to put together this proclamation on a single page. We thought about a resolution, but the initial whereases approached 3 pages, leaving little room for signatures, and not wanting to give you a book, we tried to consolidate to narrow down some of the whereases. But when our draft was made and made the rounds of the staff, several staff members, including not a staff member, current staff member, Art Jensen, had several more items that were must included in that resolution. Finally, Lourdes says, I can make it fit on 1 page. And I thought, gee, I wonder if I'm going to have to present a scroll of butcher paper so she could list all these things, and or it'd be in 2 size print, size 2 font, which I'd no way be able to read. But anyhow, Lourdes did her thing, and Lourdes does good things, I will say that. Okay, Director Pierce, will you present the final proclamation?
So you've learned that my strength is not less words, it's more words. And I asked other people to add what they thought Nicole had done and how she had done it. And that was the essence. It's your integrity, your kindness, your thoroughness, your tenacity. You follow through, you have endless amounts of patience. I don't know how you get anything at home because you use it all up here. And it was a delight to think about it and to reflect on all of the things that you've done all this time and all of the people that you worked with. And when I asked Nicole what she was most proud of, and I'm thinking managing San Francisco, the WISUP, you know, all of these things, the water coming over the Moccasin Dam, the mountain tunnel, just all of these things, her comment was mentoring and working with staff. The woman has a heart. And so I'm sure that everybody here is as delighted to give her this, and I'm not going to read it. I promised Tom I would not. So
I couldn't read it.
if you would like to see it, come and take a look, because it was a labor of love, and it was on behalf of all of us. You're welcome. Now it's your turn, Shrek.
It's my, I know. But if you read it, I would be crying. That would be the problem. Thank you, Barbara, very much. Thank you, Chair Chambers. I've been thinking about this for some time, like what would I say when I got up here today? But I do want to thank all of you for your words and your kindness, and the staff. You are the most important part of the agency. It has been my honor to work with this amazing system on behalf of the member agencies and all their customers. You know, I'm really proud of this public service. It isn't something that I thought about. I don't know that anybody thinks about that when they get out of school. And, you know, as a young engineer, I fell into water, literally. But to work in the community that I live in, some of you may know this. I grew up in Burlingame, lived here in this area my whole life. I met my husband not far from here. We married here. Our children were baptized in this town. You know, my roots are here. And to be able to serve this community has been a really big part of this. You know, we never know where our career is going to take us. I had some amazing mentors along the way who have really helped me become the person I am in this role. And I think that speaks to my interest in mentoring others, because that's how we all do better, right? And most importantly, my family. Couldn't do it at all without them. My amazing husband, Stacy's here today, and I don't like to cry, so I'm gonna cry. But, you know, Stacy's here in support of me. Our kids who had wanted to be here, but it's just a little too far for them, especially with the new baby. But I thank them all because they have given me gifts that have given me a career and a life that I feel incredibly proud of. And it's just been an honor to do this work. So thank you very much for this, your support all this time, and your kind words.
Okay, thank you. Although we'll have more opportunity on January 29th, do any board members have comments for Ms. Sandkulla on this item? Also, please let me know if your agency is planning some sort of presentation on the 29th. Well, our intention is to have some speakers, have some time for member agencies to do their thing, and then we'll have an open mic as part of that presentation, as I understand it. So if you want to make sure that your agency is going to be called before we have open mic, let me know beforehand. So, but for now, any board members want to have a few individual words with Nicole, although there'll be more on the 29th. Go ahead. Karen.
I'm going to try not to. We're going to miss you.
Thank you.
I was onboarded by Nicole online during COVID. I think it was 2020. And I was so terrified when I got when the packet was sent to me, and it was huge. And my first thought was, oh my goodness, what have I done to myself as a fairly new council member? And I really appreciate how Nicole answered all my questions. You mentioned being an engineer. I'm a chemical engineer, and we're just glorified plumbers. I love this stuff. And Nicole even has sat with me on the way back from the tour, and I peppered her with questions, and I've learned so much. But being a grandma is so cool, and that's a lot of why you're going. And I will say, if I knew how much fun it was to be a grandma, I would have done it first.
Amen to that.
So have fun with the grandbaby.
Thank you.
We'll miss you.
Thank you.
Okay, Director Andrews.
Thank you, Chair. I also was onboarded via Zoom, and I was so happy to actually meet you in person when we were able to meet. But you, even on Zoom, you gave a lot of energy, and I could tell you really loved your job. And there's not a lot of GMs and CEOs that love their job, especially with a board this size. But you really show that you care about this community and this region. I also wanted to just thank you for guiding us on the Yosemite tour. I'm not like a camping type person. I'm not really that into nature, but I care about having water. But you actually got me excited about Yosemite, and just really being grateful for having the access to this location was very special. And I do have a 5-year-old, and we need our grandmas. They are our village, and your family is so fortunate to have you to support them. So you're going to have a more important job moving on from here. But thank you so much for your leadership.
Thank you, Angela.
Okay, any other comments? Director Ragsdale.
I don't know where to start, so I'm going to have to just pick something, maybe that hasn't been said, but I think you, as a working mom, it's really, really hard, and you've been able to do it with the help of your family and the staff, and that in itself is just a huge role model, for your kids, for the staff, and for all of us to see how you're able to make that work, and just want to thank you for that.
Thank you very much. That means a lot to me.
Okay, any other comments? Director Weed.
Thank you. As one of the charter members of this organization, it's amazing the ability not only of family complexities.
John, can you put your microphone on?
And not only the family and the complexities of the water system that you're dealing with, but 26 board members? That is an extraordinary achievement and a great talent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you very much, and more to come on the 29th.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Now, we have director discussion, and this is non-Nicole. That's item 17 on the agenda. 18's to adjourn, and I think I have about 25 seconds until we're can't start another section. So we'll start a section now, the non-director comment section.
Very brief. City of Hayward has a new city manager. Her name is Dr. Anna Alvarez, so just wanted to let you all know that. And she'll be reaching out, or Tom will be reaching out to her to do an introduction. And then also, I'm working on a Southern California toiletry drive. I'm originally from SoCal, so I'm doing a toiletry drive in Hayward on January 25th at Southland Mall, but there's drop-off locations throughout Hayward. So I have some flyers if you would like to take one. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And actually, we started on time, so we can continue this as long as we have comments. Any other director comments? Okay. Director Jordan.
Yes, Steve Jordan with Prism Hills. So we have a very similar topography to Pacific Palisades, and we are really devastated by their devastation. But we also feel like we have to stress test our system to see if we can survive something, hopefully not as bad, but see how it works and work. We can do it via model simulation to start, but I thought we ought to mention this because there are several communities along the the peninsula that go up into the foothills and could have similar problems. So after short discussion with Director Zichterman, I'm just putting it out there that maybe we should organize a meeting at some point to share plans or problems. So that's it. Thanks.
Okay. Any more comments or requests or discussion? Okay, seeing none, actually, we have an extended time for public comment, but there's no time on the clock, and so we're going to skip that. And so item 18 is adjourned to the next meeting. Next meeting is March 20th, 2025, 6:30 here. So we stand adjourned at 8:47.